Hello friends, this saga of India's news media will thrill you, confound you and leave you in a whirlpool of conflicting emotions. As with most other stories in India, this saga begins with lofty ideals and ends in a demolished credibility. Buckle up friends, we are taking off on a roller coaster journey through the chronicle of Indian journalism where freedom fighters with fountain pens morphed into clickbait knights in shining armor. Picture this, it is the late 19th century and India is chafing under the benevolent boots of the British Raj. Enter our protagonists, the valiant Indian journalists armed with nothing but their pens and an inexplicable desire to annoy the colonial masters. Newspapers like the Hindu, Amrita Vizar Patrika, and Bande Matram burst onto the scene, their pages dripping with nationalist fervor. These intrepid wordsmiths saw themselves as the vanguard of the independence movement, bravely publishing inflammatory articles right under the noses of their British overlords. The Bande Matram, edited by the revolutionary Aurobindo Ghosh, was adept at riling up the authorities. One can almost imagine Ghosh gleefully penning editorials while cackling, "Take that, you tea-sipping tyrants." Oh, how the common folks swooned. Finally, a voice for the voiceless, a beacon of hope in the darkness of colonial rule. These publications were the rock stars of their time, minus the groupies and substance abuse. The British, ever so thoughtful, responded by trying to shut them down at every turn. But our brave journalists persevered, probably fueled by an unhealthy mix of idealism and masochism. The credibility of these newspapers among the common people zoomed off the charts. After all, nothing builds trust quite like being persecuted by the tyrannical government. Plus, in an era before cat videos and Netflix, what else were people going to do for entertainment? The masses hung on to every printed word, convinced that their favorite newspaper editors were just about as divine as the gods themselves. The independence arrived, wading through the floods of innocent blood, but it also brought hope, hope of progress, of a dignified living in one's homeland, where peace and justice would prevail. The media, drunk on the sweet nectar of freedom, decided to take its role as the fourth pillar of democracy quite seriously. But let's not get too misty eyed. As the euphoria of independence faded and the harsh realities of nation building set in, our brave journalists found themselves in a bit of a pickle. Should they continue their crusading ways or cozy up to the new powers that be? Many chose the latter, transforming from fierce watchdogs into affectionate lapdogs faster than you can say government advertising revenue. This was much before the term Godi media was coined. Still, the media retained a veneer of credibility. After all, they were the fourth estate, the guardians of democracy. Never mind that they were increasingly pulling their punches when it came to criticizing the government. Every time an intrepid investigative journalist bared his or her claws, the cry went out, "Don't rock the boat," when they actually meant, "Don't upset our apple cart." You could recognize a lapdog journalist from miles. His strut and swag gave him away. The stink of his snobbery hit the untutored like a champion boxer's punch. The public, bless their naive hearts, still largely believed in the integrity of the press. It was a simpler time when fake news meant your neighbor's gossip and not a coordinated disinformation campaign. This was also the era when the seeds of sycophancy were sown. Some journalists discovered that cozying up to politicians was far more lucrative than actual reporting. Then came 1975, and with it, Indira Gandhi's infamous emergency. Suddenly, our intrepid journalists found themselves faced with a stark choice: stand up for press freedom or learn the art of creative sycophancy. Most chose the latter, churning out puff pieces about the government's achievements with an enthusiasm that would make a North Korean propagandist blush. But lo and behold, a few brave souls at publications like the Indian Express decided that maybe, just maybe, this whole democracy thing was worth fighting for. They resisted censorship, with the Indian Express famously publishing a blank editorial page in protest. It was a moment of redemption, a flickering flame of journalistic integrity in the darkness of authoritarianism. Post emergency, the Indian media experienced a renaissance of sorts. Investigative journalism flourished, corruption scandals were exposed, and for a while, it seemed like the press had remembered its role as the voice of the people. Publications and news channels competed to break big stories, and the public's faith in the media was somewhat restored, only somewhat. Public memory is never short, unlike what politicians and their fellow travelers in the media believe. And for a while, they actually kept that promise. The period from 1977 to 2014 saw some genuinely good journalism. Investigative reports uncovered scandals, corrupt politicians were exposed, and the media actually seemed to remember its job description. Remember the Tehelka expose in 2001? It was a masterpiece of undercover journalism that made defense officials squirm. And the Radia tapes scandal in 2010, a delightful expose of the cozy nexus between lobbyists, politicians, and oh, wait, journalists. Awkward, very awkward. But let's not get carried away. For every hard hitting expose, there were a dozen puff pieces about politicians' fashion choices or astrologers predicting election results. Baby steps, people. Enter 2014 and the era of Narendra Modi. Suddenly, our fearless fourth estate seemed to develop an acute case of selective mutism. Critical questions? Sorry, we don't do those anymore. Holding power to account? How passe. Instead, we were treated to the spectacle of news anchors practically tripping over themselves to see who could be the most obsequious to the powers that be. The transformation was truly something to behold. News channels that once prided themselves on hard hitting journalism now produced shows that were indistinguishable from government propaganda. It was as if someone had flipped a switch, turning finger wagging fierce watchdogs into tail wagging lapdogs overnight. Has the mainstream media lost all credibility since 2014? If only it were that simple. The truth is, they have worked tirelessly to shred every last bit of credibility they had, and then set fire to the shreds for good measure. We have been treated to the spectacle of news anchors transforming into cheerleaders, shouting matches masquerading as debates, and investigative journalism being replaced by WhatsApp forwards. It is as if the entire mainstream media decided to audition for a TV comedy show, but forgot to tell the audience. The proactive defense of the government by some media houses has been so enthusiastic, it makes North Korean state TV look like a bastion of critical thinking. Meanwhile, the few remaining voices of dissent find themselves facing threats, violence, and sedition charges. Because nothing says vibrant democracy quite like strapping sedition charges on journalists, right? And the public, well, they weren't fooled. Trust in mainstream media plummeted faster than a lead ball. People began to view news anchors not as purveyors of truth, but as overpaid actors in a never ending political drama. The era of unquestioning faith in the press was well and truly over. But wait, when all hope seemed lost, riding to the rescue on the back of a 4G data plan came the internet based news media. These plucky upstarts promised to revolutionize journalism, armed with nothing but a smartphone camera and an unshakable belief in the power of the subscribe button. Suddenly, everyone with a YouTube channel was a journalist. No need for pesky things like fact checking or editorial oversight. If it gets clicks, it leads. These digital crusaders brought us hard hitting exposes like, "You won't believe what this politician said," and 10 reasons why everything is a conspiracy. And in brackets, number 7 will shock you. Well, these were the sort of thumbnails you could see on the YouTube channels. But amidst the sea of clickbait and conspiracy theories, some genuinely good journalism did emerge. platforms like the print chose to stick to the hallowed principles of traditional journalism. Other outlets like The Wire, Scroll, News Laundry, and The Quint began to fill the void left by mainstream media's abdication of their responsibilities. These channels asked tough questions, conducted investigations, and generally behaved like journalists are supposed to. But is this online mishmash of information and misinformation really more reliable than traditional media? Well, that's like asking if a lucky dip is more reliable than a rigged game. Sure, you might occasionally strike gold, but you are just as likely to end up with a handful of fool's gold. The beauty of YouTube news channels is their diversity. You don't like one perspective? Simply scroll on to the next video where someone with an even more outrageous opinion is waiting to enlighten you. It's like a buffet of information where you can pick and choose your facts to suit your tastes. As for whether internet-based media will prove to be a positive contributor to India's nation-building efforts, well, let's just say that if nation-building were an Olympic sport, our current media landscape would be competing for gold in the polarization and outrage generation category. But let's not forget the true hero of modern Indian media, WhatsApp. This humble messaging app has single-handedly revolutionized the spread of information. Why wait for journalists to verify facts when your WhatsApp group uncles can forward you earth-shattering news about NASA discovering ancient Hindu temples on Mars? The story of Indian media is a tragicomedy of epic proportions. From the heady days of the freedom struggle to the current quagmire of credibility crisis, it's been quite a ride. The mainstream media may have lost its way, but the internet-based alternatives aren't exactly a shining beacon of hope either. Perhaps the real reason here is that no matter the medium, journalism requires more than just the ability to string words together or point a camera. It requires integrity, courage, and a commitment to truth that seems increasingly rare in our click-driven, outrage-fueled media landscape. So here we are in the world where WhatsApp forwards are considered breaking news and Twitter threads pass for in-depth analysis. Is this the brave new world of journalism we were promised? Or have we simply traded one flawed system for another, albeit one with better means? As for nation building, well, if a nation can be built on a foundation of sensationalism, misinformation, and polarized opinion, then India is well on its way to become a superpower. After all, who needs facts when you have forwards? Only time will tell. In the meantime, perhaps we should all brush up on our critical thinking skills. After all, in the wild west of modern Indian media, the ability to separate fact from fiction isn't just useful, it's downright essential for survival. Happy news hunting, fellow citizens.